So, amoral managers do not focus on what's fair for customers or employees, and tend to believe that it's not fair or necessary to consider ethical principles when making business decisions, because as long as they stay within the boundaries and the legalities of running their business, then they're okay. Now, I should admit, right? So I'll back myself up a little bit and admit that research suggests that there are two types of amoral managers: ones who do things intentionally, so they would fall in line with the bottom half of what I say, the believes that it's not necessary, blah, 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 and then unintentional people or managers, excuse me. And these people aren't really thinking about it one way or the other, right? So again, they're not focusing on what's fair, whether that's deliberate or not so much. And so I'll give you a few examples of this. So one would be the police force. So for a long time, and you could say maybe 20 or so years ago, some police force had rules about who could join, right? And they would say something like, hey, for you to be able to join, you have to be no more than 180 pounds, and you have to be 5'9" or taller. Um, Now, this might be great for a police officer. Maybe they thought, hey, people who meet these requirements tend to be really good in physical fitness, and they adhere to the standards we want to set. But there's a problem with saying something like you have to be 5'9" and under 180 pounds. Um, and I'll give you a quick second to think about that problem. What is the issue with those rules? Well, I really did give you a second. But the issues are that oftentimes women won't be able to join the police force, right? The average height of a woman is about 5'4". And so you've excluded tons of women who might want to be police officers. And then there are some ethnic groups who also might have trouble with that. Those decisions, right? So some groups tend to also have a lower average when it comes to height, and so you're excluding them. What about tall people? So I think I mentioned in class before, I'm not sure. My brother is 6'5" and he's 179 pounds, right? Which means that if you see my brother, he is like super skinny. Like this guy is very skinny, right? But for the average person who's 6'5", they're probably going to be significantly more than 180 pounds, probably 200, maybe 210. You've excluded them too. Like there's so many people you're excluding with these rules. What's going on? And so, eventually the police force had to back off of it, because there are people who are absolutely amazing police officers who don't fit within those parameters. Another kind of thing that you could use as an example would be student loan debt. One could argue that schools or the government, or you could name a host of people here, um, tend to be amoral when it comes to kind of figuring out how much to charge for student loans, how much to charge for college admission, so on and so forth. I'm not going to make that argument because I'm a professor, but I think you could make it yourself. The third moral management model is moral management. And under moral management, the manager has high standards of ethical behavior, both personally and professionally. And when we talk about examples of moral management, there are several. For example, Merck. So Merck is a pharmaceutical firm. They invested a ton of money, millions of dollars, to develop a treatment for river blindness, something that is a um, disease that affects certain parts of the world, um, specifically developing countries. And I think about 18 million people were affected by river blindness. Um, when Merck found out that no government or aid organization was willing to buy the drug, right? So they tried to sell it, they went through normal means. Um, Mark just said, forget it. We'll give it away for free, and we'll give it away for free indefinitely. So forever. Any group that needs it can have it, right? So, rather than saying, hey, we'll just hold on to it until people can't afford it or decide to buy it, or, we'll sell it, we'll give it away this year and try to start selling it next year when people see how effective it is. They just said, forget it. We'll just give it away. I always like to bring up Mizzou when I talk about this. So I was in a car accident. I actually mentioned this in another lecture, but I was in a car accident after my freshman year of college, and it was a pretty bad accident, and I needed to take a semester off school. Well, I think I mentioned before that I was on a full ride scholarship, and I was really worried that Mizzou was going to pull my scholarship. There aren't a huge number of full rides going around, and it was a full ride scholarship from the business school. So I was just like, oh my God, really super worried. But they ended up being really great. They were so nice to me. The business school was so nice. My advisor was amazing. And they just held the scholarship for me. They were like, we believe you. I was really worried that they wouldn't believe that I would come back in a semester, but they were like, not only do we believe it, we have faith in you, and we want you to come back. And they saved my scholarship, which was a blessing. And then last but not least, I included a picture of Hurricane Harvey. So during Hurricane Harvey, there were a ton of businesses that did some really great things. I think there was a furniture store that opened their business so people could come in and get out of the elements. And we're gonna see moral models pop up now. I think Dorian is, I think that's what they're pronouncing it. I don't know. Is about to hit land here in the U.S. and I think we will see a lot of people step up. Not everyone, but a lot of people. So I'm going to spend the next few slides talking about how consumers view CSR. So when you ask consumers up front, how likely are you to base your decisions on a company's reputation when you're doing any of the following, and how likely are you to base your kind of decision on the company's CSR level when you're doing any of the following. Here's what we see when it comes to purchasing a car or major appliance. Reputation tends to matter more than CSR. When it comes to choosing a bank or financial services company, reputation outpaces CSR. And in fact, if you look at every single one of these, reputation tends to outpace CSR. Why is that? Why are consumers more concerned with a company's reputation than their CSR level, when the same consumers will tell us that CSR is extremely important to them? Think on that for a second. Make sure you're still thinking about what I just said, and I'll move on to this slide. So when we say that consumers say that they like companies who demonstrate corporate social responsibility, what does that mean? Well, one thing is that consumers have suggested that they're willing to pay a premium price for sustainable products. Um, when you look at the figures, in 2015, 68% among consumers who earn, well, let me start off by saying this. Among consumers in general, we see this increased trend, right? So in 2013, about 50% of consumers said that they would pay more for sustainable goods. In 2015, that number had jumped to 66%. Of that 66%, how do you break that down? 68% of consumers who earn less than 20K said they'd be willing to pay more. I'm a little skeptical of that. 63% of those who earn more than 50K. So if you look at the numbers, people who earn less than 20K are more likely to say that they'd spend more on sustainable products. Almost three-fourths of millennials say that they'd pay more for sustainable products. 72% of Gen Zers and 51% of boomerangers. I said I'm a little skeptical. I would imagine that you'd have to be skeptical too. So people who earn less than 20K are probably more idealistic. They're probably younger. And so, of course, they'll say they'll pay more money. They don't have tons of money, which makes me wonder if they actually will pay more money. And the people who we would assume has the most money, boomers, are the least likely to say that they'd pay more for sustainable products. Why is that the case, in your opinion? So there's another thing, another phenomena that you should know about sustainable products, and it's called, the phenomena itself is called sustainability liability. So according to this finding, the positive effect of product sustainability on consumer preference is reduced when strength related attributes are valued, right? Sometimes even resulting in preferences for less sustainable product alternatives. So, and that's what they call the liability. So, let me kind of talk about what that means. What researchers have found is that if you want a product to be gentle, you are all in for sustainable goods, right? If you want a product to be gentle, then you prefer sustainable goods. And so they found that parents tend to like sustainable diapers because they want diapers to be gentle. When people are looking for face wash or things to put on their skin, they tend to like gentle products. And so sustainable products work very well. However, when you want a product that really works, right? So if you want something to be strong, like you want your detergent to be strong so it can fight stains, or you want your pen to be strong so that it can work and it can write for as long as you need it to, you tend to not want sustainable goods, right? So let me say that again. When you want a product to be gentle, you as consumers tend to prefer sustainable products. However, if you want a product to be strong, you tend to not prefer sustainable products. You want, actually, consumers prefer non-sustainable goods. And this is where the liability starts. So if you want a product to be strong, you don't, then sustainability is actually a liability. And that means for Tide to come out with a sustainable detergent or Bic to come out with a sustainable pen is problematic. However, if L'Oreal came out with a sustainable face wash, that would be great because you'd want a face wash to be gentle. And that's what we mean when we refer to sustainability liability. According to sustainability liability, any product that you want to be strong, you don't actually want to be sustainable. So I love to ask a question about the fair trade effect when I'm writing the test. So when you receive the test, you should expect a question about this. To explain the fair trade effect, which is a phenomena that was found by some researchers, I'll point to two different studies. So in study one, if you look to the left side of the slide, you see two bags of coffee. Both bags are the same type of coffee, the same size, the same price. The only real difference is that one is fair trade, as indicated by the green ribbon coming down the package, and the other one just says coffee in that same ribbon space. And what they wanted to know is if people were more likely to purchase coffee that makes a claim of being fair trade, right? And so what they found is a 10% increase in coffee sales when this same coffee was labeled fair trade, right? So you could say there's a 10% premium on fair trade coffee. If it's fair trade, you'll get a 10% increase in sales, which sounds good, right? Fair trade coffee, people are more attracted to it. Bada boom, bada bing. However, what exactly does that mean? And so let's look at the second study, which is denoted by the two coffee bags on the right side. So in this study, they did something really interesting, right? So they took the same coffee, right? Except one is called premium coffee. So the one on the left is premium coffee, and it is fair trade, right? The one on the right is just regular French roast. It's also fair trade. And what they wanted to know is how do sales differ with an 8% price increase between fair trade premium coffee and fair trade regular coffee. What they found was pretty interesting. So when the price increased for premium coffee, you saw no real effect on sales. You saw a really minimal increase. So maybe let's say a 2% increase in sales. That's very minimal. So fair trade in general, if it's premium coffee, can sustain the blow of an 8% price increase. What happens for non-premium coffee? What happens when you increase the price 8% for regular coffee, regular fair trade coffee? Well, you end up getting a 30% decrease in sales. So sales decline 30% because of an 8% increase for fair trade coffee. So the question becomes, are people really willing to pay more for fair trade or sustainable coffee? Well, according to the slide I showed you a minute ago, the one before this, the answer to that would be yes. If you look at this data, the answer does not seem as clear. First of all, according to the study on the left, fair trade only boosts sales by 10%. I would think when 68% of millennials are saying that they are willing to spend more on a product that and that they want sustainable products, that 10% would just be the bottom of the barrel. I would think that this number would be much higher. In terms of a price increase, I definitely would not have predicted that an 8% price increase would lead to a 30% decrease in regular fair trade coffee. That just seems astounding to me, considering, again, what millennials and Gen Z consumers said that they were willing to do. So the question is, does CSR really matter to the public? Some people will come back and say, yes, it does. Um, and specifically what they'll say is that, sure, true, customers won't pay more for products from responsible companies, but they still expect companies to behave responsibly. And when you ask com- consumers how important is it that a company shows a commitment to social responsibility, a lot of people say it's very important to fairly important, and yet they're unwilling to pay more for products from responsible companies, which again leads me to the question, are we really looking for ethics here, or what are we looking for as consumers? Do we just want to feel good about the companies we buy from? Or are we, if we're not willing to put our money where our mouth is, then what's going on here? So I've talked about kind of this idea that younger people say that they are willing to pay more, but then we look at studies like the fair trade effect, or we looked at sustainability liability. And I have to ask myself, do we really care about ethics, right? We know that companies like Nestle are bottling water in places that are going through droughts. We know that Amazon employs people in factories where the working conditions are terrible. I've actually heard that the working conditions aren't that great in their corporate offices as well. We know that Walmart has lawsuit after lawsuit, right? They just settled lawsuits last year because they were accused of being discriminatory against people of color. They were accused of being discriminatory against women in leadership. Walmart has settled cases where so if we go back to this question of, do consumers really care about corporate social responsibility? One thing I want to point out is that when you ask consumers what they care about the most when it comes to CSR or elements of CSR within a company, what they actually say is most important is that the company treats and pays employees well. So you could look at this by saying, sure, this makes a lot of sense. If you're going to be socially responsible, you should treat your employees well. You could also look at this and say that this answer is somewhat self-serving, right? Because we all see ourselves in the role of the employee, or at least we can empathize with these employees regardless of the company. And so again, the question becomes, are we thinking about ourselves when we talk about CSR? Or are we thinking about the planet? Um, and I'll let you kind of come up with your own answer to that. One thing that companies can try to do is help their employees budget, right? So take your income and budget it. So I always like to bring this example up in class. McDonald's came out with a budget for their employees a couple of years ago, and they got a lot of backlash for, I think, good reason. So, one, McDonald's assumed that the employee would have two jobs, as though working at McDonald's means that you need two jobs, right? Secondly, they got into some trouble by assuming that this person would have to pay $0 for their heating. and that they were paying $600 for their mortgage. I personally don't know too many people who are paying $600 for their mortgage, but apparently people at McDonald's believe that this is a possibility. Um, Looking at numbers that kind of, and I told you I was interested in finance and financial decision making. The average rent in a lot of states is significantly more than $600. So the only assumption you can make here is that, one, you don't have to pay for heat, regardless of where you live, according to McDonald's, and two, that the average employee should have two jobs and roommates. That's really the only way you can get $600 in rent. So, interesting idea by McDonald's. You could also do something like Amazon, which actually hired employees to say nice things about the company on Twitter. So rather than kind of going through the hard task of figuring out how to treat uh, employees well and save its reputation, it decided to just kind of fake a good reputation by having people say nice things about it on online. This makes sense. Amazon has come under a lot of flack for how it treats its employees and their working conditions. So I guess this is another tactic you could take. There are ways to contribute to the well-being of employees, and I want to make sure I emphasize this slide because this is something going on in America right now. A lot of employees are pushing back at being treated poorly. A lot of employees are pushing back by being vocal. Others are pushing back by just leaving companies. And you keep hearing people talk about they don't have enough employees, but then you look and they're either paying extremely low wages for the job that employees are being asked to do. They may treat employees poorly. They may not follow their own rules and regulations. There are so many things right now that are stopping people from working at certain companies. And we've seen companies shut down and they will say, oh, it's because I can't afford workers. And I would argue that even though that sucks, that in and of itself is a part of capitalism, right? So the market decides. So the market right now, in terms of employees, are making decisions on how much they think they should be paid, and if they're not being paid that amount, they're walking out, which is really capitalism at work. People are complaining about it, but this is how capitalism is supposed to work. Anyway, so contributing to the well-being of employees, you can improve their quality of life by paying fair wages, by increasing the stability of worker schedules and reasonable workloads. I know as college students, a lot of you have jobs that are all over the place, and these are things that would absolutely help. If you, another thing, develop a culture of supporting employees' personal needs, like offering education reimbursement, offering some kind of help for caregiving, and then offering some sort of mental health um, action. Take steps to foster a sense of social belonging among the employees. You can make recognition and praise a part of your culture, but you have to make sure that you're not just doing fake, recognition and praise, but that it's a real thing and that it's integrated into your business. When I worked at Altria, one of the things they would do is they would have these contests every quarter, and if you won the contest, the top three people could choose a gift. They had a catalog of gifts, so depending, they had like first place, second place, third place catalogs, and you could choose. That was pretty cool. And then lastly, create strengthen financial wellness programs. You want to make sure your employees are aware of retirement information, and that they get feedback if necessary. Some companies are starting to offer student loan incentives. Um, and that actually is a boon to a lot of people. So things like that.